My name is Daniel Mercer, and I am 67 years old. For 43 years, I have carried a secret that has broken me in ways I never imagined possible. I was a CIA operative specializing in psychological interrogation and intelligence extraction from high-value targets. I spoke 7 languages fluently, held advanced degrees in behavioral psychology and linguistics, and by 1981, I had interrogated terrorists, double agents, foreign operatives, and criminals whose names would make your blood run cold. But nothing, absolutely nothing in my training, in my education, in my entire understanding of reality prepared me for what happened in the winter of 1981 when I was brought into a black site facility deep in the Cascade Mountains and told I would be interrogating a creature that should not exist, a living, breathing Bigfoot. And what that creature confessed to me during 72 hours of isolated contact changed not just my career or my understanding of science, but my fundamental belief in what it means to be human, what it means to be conscious, and why some truths are kept buried, not to protect governments or institutions, but to protect the very fabric of our collective sanity. The call came on January 14, 1981. I was stationed at Langley, working on a routine debriefing of a Soviet defector, when my direct superior, a man I will call Agent Harlow, pulled me from the session without explanation. His face was pale, his usual composure fractured. He led me to a soundproof briefing room where 3 other officials waited, none of whom I recognized. They wore no badges, no insignia, nothing to identify their branch or clearance level. The senior officer, a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that seemed to see through bone, looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "Mr. Mercer," she said, her voice measured and cold, "you have been selected for an assignment that does not officially exist. You will be transported to a secure location. You will conduct an interrogation. You will document your findings. And when you leave that location, you will never speak of it again to anyone, including your family, your colleagues, or any future employer. Refusal is not an option. Disclosure will result in consequences you cannot imagine. Do you understand?" I understood that I had no choice. I understood that whatever I was about to see would be classified at a level beyond anything I had encountered. I understood that my life was about to change. I nodded. "Good," she said. "You leave in 2 hours." The flight was long, disorienting. I was blindfolded for the final approach, strapped into a helicopter that descended through what felt like endless mountain passes. The air grew colder, thinner. When they finally removed the blindfold, I stood in front of a concrete structure built into the side of a mountain, camouflaged so perfectly that even from 10 feet away, it looked like natural rock face. Armed guards surrounded the perimeter, their faces blank, their weapons ready. I was escorted inside through a series of reinforced steel doors, each requiring biometric scans and code clearances I did not possess. The facility was utilitarian, sterile, lit by harsh fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly in the silence. Everything smelled of disinfectant and something else, something organic, musky, alive. We descended 3 levels underground. The temperature dropped. My breath misted in the air. Finally, we stopped in front of a vault door, the kind you would find in a bank, except this one was marked with a single designation, Subject Alpha. The senior officer from Langley was there, along with 2 scientists in lab coats and a military doctor. The woman gestured toward a viewing window beside the vault door, a thick pane of reinforced glass looking into a containment cell. What I saw inside made my knees weak. The creature sat on the floor of the cell, its back against the far wall, massive arms wrapped around its knees. It was at least 8.5 feet tall, even seated. Its body was covered in thick, dark brown hair, matted and dirty. The shoulders were impossibly broad, the arms long and powerful, the hands enormous, with thick fingers that ended in blunt, human-like nails. But it was the face that stopped my heart. The face was not animal. It was not quite human either, but it was closer to human than anything I had ever seen outside our species. A heavy brow ridge shadowed deep-set eyes that were dark, wet, intelligent. The nose was broad and flat, the mouth wide, the jaw strong. And those eyes were looking directly at me through the glass, not with animal curiosity, but with something I can only describe as recognition, understanding, and profound, unbearable sadness. The senior officer spoke quietly beside me. Subject Alpha was captured 6 weeks ago in the Olympic National Forest after a logging crew reported repeated sightings and aggressive territorial behavior. A joint task force involving military special operations and wildlife containment specialists deployed tranquilizer protocols and secured the subject after a pursuit lasting 18 hours. It sustained minor injuries during capture, but has been medically stabilized. It has refused all food, it has not slept, it has not made a single sound since arriving at this facility. Your objective, Mr. Mercer, is to establish communication, extract intelligence regarding its species, its population, its capabilities, and any potential threat to national security. You have 72 hours. I stared at her. You want me to interrogate a Bigfoot? She stared back. We want you to interrogate an unknown bipedal hominid of exceptional intelligence that may represent a parallel branch of human evolution. We want to know what it knows. We want to know if there are more. We want to know if they are a threat. And we want to know why, despite decades of sightings and encounters, they have remained hidden. You are the best psychological interrogator we have. Make it talk. I entered the containment cell alone, unarmed, carrying nothing but a folding chair and a digital recorder. The vault door sealed behind me with a sound like a coffin closing. The creature watched me, unmoving. I set the chair down 10 feet from where it sat, maintaining distance, positioning myself at an angle rather than directly confrontational. I sat slowly, deliberately, keeping my hands visible, my posture open. The air in the cell was thick, humid, filled with that musky scent I had noticed earlier. Earthy and organic, like wet soil and pine needles, and something else. Something that reminded me of my own sweat after a long hike, something mammalian and familiar. I took a breath, steadied my voice, and spoke in English. My name is Daniel Mercer. I am here to talk with you. I am not here to hurt you. I am here to understand. The creature did not move. Its eyes remained fixed on me, unblinking. I continued, keeping my tone calm, measured, the same tone I used with hostile operatives who refused to cooperate. I know you can understand me. I know you are intelligent. I know you are frightened and angry. You have been taken from your home. You have been confined. You have every reason not to trust me. But I am asking you to try. Because if we do not communicate, if we do not find a way to understand each other, the people outside this room will make decisions about you and your kind without your input. And those decisions may not be in your best interest. The creature blinked, slowly, once. Then it shifted slightly, uncrossing its arms, placing its massive hands flat on the floor. It was the first movement it had made since I entered. I waited. Silence stretched between us, heavy and alive. Then, from somewhere deep in its chest, came a sound. Low, resonant, not quite a growl, not quite a hum. It was vocalization, deliberate, controlled. It was trying to speak. I leaned forward slightly. I am listening. The creature's mouth opened, revealing teeth that were flat, herbivorous, with slightly elongated canines. It made another sound, this one more complex. A series of clicks and low tones that seemed to form a pattern, a structure. It was language. Not human language, but language nonetheless. I felt my pulse quicken. I do not understand your words, but I hear that you are trying to communicate. Can you understand mine? The creature nodded, a clear, unmistakable nod. my training, my entire career, everything I thought I knew about intelligence and consciousness collapsed in that single gesture. This was not an animal. This was a person. I spent the next 6 hours in that cell, and in that time, through a combination of gestures, drawings on paper I had requested from the observation team, and eventually a rudimentary sign language system we developed together, the creature began to tell me its story. I learned that it had a name, though the vocalization it made to identify itself was impossible for me to reproduce. The scientists outside later approximated it phonetically as Kayeller, and that is what I called it from then on. Kaylor was male, approximately 40 years old based on markers I could observe, and he was not alone. He was part of a small family group that lived in the deep wilderness of the Olympic Range, a group that included his mate, 2 juveniles, and an elder female. He had been separated from them during the capture. He did not know if they were safe. The grief in his eyes when he gestured toward the drawings of his family was so human, so raw, that I had to look away. Over the following days, Kaylor revealed things that would take me years to fully process. He showed me, through crude sketches and pantomime, that his people, the forest people, as he called them in the gestural language we created, had once been numerous. He drew maps indicating territories that spanned from Northern California through British Columbia, deep into the interior ranges. But over centuries, over millennia, human expansion had pushed them into smaller and smaller refuges. He showed me images of conflict, of his ancestors being hunted, killed, driven away. He showed me how his people had learned to hide, to move only at night, to avoid all human contact, to erase their presence from the world. He showed me that his species had developed strategies of survival so sophisticated, so deliberate, that they had become ghosts. And he showed me why. Because every time they had tried to make contact, every time they had revealed themselves, humans had responded with violence, with fear, with the desire to capture, to study, to control. His people had learned, over generations, that the only way to survive was to disappear. But it was on the 3rd day, during the final hours of my assignment, that Kaylor confessed something that I have never been able to forget, something that haunts me every single night. I had asked him, through our makeshift communication system, why his people had such sophisticated intelligence, why they had language, culture, tools, if they chose to live as they did, hidden and isolated. Why not fight back? Why not demand recognition, rights, protection? Kaylor looked at me for a long time, his dark eyes searching mine. Then he began to draw. He drew 2 groups of figures, early humans, identical in shape. Then he drew them diverging, one group moving into open plains, the other into deep forests. He showed me, as best he could, an evolutionary split, a branching of the human family tree. His people and mine had shared a common ancestor. We were not separate species. We were cousins. And then he drew something that made my blood run cold. He drew human figures with weapons, with fire, with tools, surrounding and attacking his people. He drew violence, massacre, genocide. And then, with slow, deliberate strokes, he drew something else. He drew human figures, taking members of his species, not killing them, but capturing them. He drew laboratories, cages, experiments. He gestured to himself, to his own body, to the scars I had noticed on his arms and torso, old wounds that looked like they had come from restraints, from medical instruments. And then he made a gesture I had taught him earlier, the gesture for before. He was telling me that this was not the first time he had been captured. I felt the room spin. I asked him, my hands shaking, how many times? He held up 3 fingers. 3 times in his life he had been captured by humans. 3 times he had been held in facilities like this one. 3 times he had been studied, tested, examined. And each time he had been released, not out of mercy, but because his captors had gotten what they wanted, because keeping him was too risky, too expensive, too difficult to justify. He was expendable, disposable, a specimen. I asked him what they had done to him. He could not explain in detail. Our communication was too limited, but he gestured to his head, to his chest, to his blood. They had taken samples. They had scanned his brain. They had tested his cognitive abilities. They had tried to understand what he was, how he thought, how his species had survived so long in secret. And then they had erased the records, classified the findings, and returned him to the wilderness as if nothing had happened, as if he were not a person, as if his suffering, his fear, his captivity meant nothing. I sat there, in that cold cell, staring at this being who had endured more cruelty, more violation, more systematic dehumanization than most of the war criminals I had interrogated, and I realized that I was not the interrogator in this room. I was the monster, because I was part of the system that had done this to him. I was complicit. I was the face of the machine that saw him not as a person, but as a thing to be studied, controlled, used, and discarded. And the worst part, the part that broke me, was that Kaler knew this. He understood exactly what I was, what I represented, and yet he had chosen to communicate with me. He had chosen to trust me with his story, with his pain, with the truth of his existence. Why? I asked him, my voice breaking. Why tell me this? Why trust me at all? Kaler reached out, slowly, carefully, and placed one massive hand on my shoulder. The gesture was gentle, deliberate, almost protective. Then he made the sign we had established for hope. He was hoping that I was different. He was hoping that I would do something, say something, change something. He was hoping that his suffering would matter. I left that facility 72 hours after I arrived, as instructed. I submitted my report, clinical and detailed, documenting Kaler's intelligence, his language capabilities, his social structure, his fear of humans. I recommended, in the strongest possible terms, that he be released immediately and that no further captures be authorized. I recommended that his species be granted protected status, that their territories be secured, that contact protocols be established based on consent and respect, not coercion and violence. I recommended that we treat them as what they were, people. My report was filed, classified, and buried. Kaler was not released. 6 weeks later, I received a single-line communication from Langley. Subject, Alpha, deceased due to complications from captivity. No further action required. I knew what that meant. I knew that Kaler had died alone, in a cell, surrounded by people who saw him as a specimen, not a person. I knew that his family would never know what happened to him. I knew that his people would continue to hide, continue to fear, continue to vanish. And I knew that I had failed him. I resigned from the CIA 3 months later. I told my superiors I was burned out, that I needed to step away from fieldwork. They accepted my resignation without question. Relieved, I think, to be rid of someone who had seen too much, who knew too much, who might ask inconvenient questions. I moved to a small cabin in Montana, far from cities, far from people, far from the machinery of government and secrecy. I tried to forget. I tried to move on. But every night, I see Kaler's eyes. Every night, I hear the sound he made when I left that cell for the last time. A low, mournful vocalization that I understood, even without language, as goodbye. Every night, I feel the weight of his hand on my shoulder, that gesture of hope, of trust, of desperate, fragile belief that maybe, just maybe, I would do the right thing. And I did nothing. I saved no one. I changed nothing. For 43 years, I have lived with that failure. For 43 years, I have kept Kaler's story locked inside me, forbidden by law and fear from speaking, from telling the truth. But I am 67 years old now. I am dying. The cancer that started in my lungs has spread to my liver, my bones, my brain. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe less, and I have decided that I will not die with this secret. I will not let Kaler's suffering, his story, his existence be erased. I do not care about the consequences. I do not care about the threats, the classifications, the men in dark suits who will come to silence me. Because Kaler mattered. His people matter. And the truth, no matter how painful, no matter how dangerous, deserves to be told. What I learned in that cell, what Kaler confessed to me, is this. Bigfoot is real. They are not animals. They are not monsters. They are people, a branch of the human family that diverged tens of thousands of years ago and chose a different path, a path of harmony with the wilderness, of small family groups, of oral tradition and minimal technology. They are intelligent, emotional, self-aware. They have language, culture, art, music. They mourn their dead. They love their children. They feel pain, fear, joy, hope. And they have been systematically hunted, captured, studied, and erased by governments that see them as threats, as specimens, as inconvenient truths that challenge our understanding of human uniqueness. Kaler told me that his people are dying out. There are fewer than 300 individuals left, scattered across the Pacific Northwest and parts of Canada. Their population is too small, too fragmented to sustain itself. Genetic diversity is collapsing. Infant mortality is rising. They are facing extinction, not from natural causes, but from human expansion, from habitat destruction, from the cumulative trauma of centuries of persecution. And they know it. They know they are the last. They know that within a few generations, they will be gone, and no one will remember that they existed. Kaler also told me something else, something that I have struggled to reconcile, something that challenges everything I thought I understood about consciousness and existence. He told me that his people remember, not just individual memories, but something deeper, something collective. He described it through gestures and drawings, a shared knowledge that passes from generation to generation, not through teaching alone, but through something else, something he could not fully explain. The scientists I reported this to dismissed it as superstition, as primitive belief, but I was there. I saw the way Kaler's eyes changed when he tried to describe it, the way his entire body seemed to resonate with something ancient, something vast. He was trying to tell me that his people carry the memory of the world, of the forests, of the migrations of animals, of the cycles of seasons stretching back thousands of years. He was trying to tell me that when his people die, we do not just lose a species, we lose a library. We lose a way of knowing the world that is older, deeper, and more connected than anything our civilization has produced. I did not believe him, not fully, not then. But years later, long after I had left the agency, I began researching indigenous oral traditions, ethnobotany, deep ecology. I found patterns, echoes of what Kaler had tried to describe. I found stories from Native American tribes about the forest people, about beings who were guardians of knowledge, who could speak to the land, who remembered the old ways. I found accounts from explorers, from trappers, from loggers, of encounters with creatures that seemed to possess an uncanny awareness of their surroundings, an ability to predict weather, to find water, to navigate terrain that baffled even experienced guides. I found scientific studies on animal cognition, on collective memory in species like elephants and whales, on the possibility that consciousness itself might be distributed, networked, encoded in ways we do not yet understand. And I began to wonder if Kaler had been trying to tell me something that our science is only now beginning to grasp, that intelligence is not singular, that memory is not just biochemical, that there are ways of being in the world that we have not yet imagined. But even if I am wrong, even if Kaler's description of collective memory was metaphor or misunderstanding, the core truth remains. His people are real, they are dying, and we are responsible. Every logging road that cuts deeper into old-growth forest, every housing development that sprawls into the wild, every acre of wilderness we pave and populate, we are erasing them. And we are doing it deliberately, knowingly, because acknowledging their existence would require us to change, to stop, to make space for a form of life that challenges our dominance. It would require us to admit that we are not alone, that we are not the only conscious beings with a right to this planet. that our expansion has consequences, that our progress has a cost, and that cost is measured in the extinction of our own family. Kaler's final confession, the one that has haunted me most, came in the last hour before I was pulled from that cell. He had been drawing again, sketches of his family, of his children, and then he stopped, looked at me, and made a gesture I did not understand at first. He pointed at me, then at himself, then at the drawings of his children. Then he made the sign for same. I stared at him, confused. He repeated the gesture more slowly. He pointed at my heart, then at his heart, then at the children again, and then I understood. He was telling me that his children and my children, if I had any, were the same. That despite our differences, despite the evolutionary divergence, despite the millennia of separation, we were still family, we were still kin, and that what happened to his children mattered, should matter to me, because in the end, we are all just trying to survive, to protect the ones we love, to leave something behind that says we were here, we lived, we mattered. I have no children. I never married. I dedicated my life to service, to secrets, to a career that consumed everything and gave back nothing but nightmares and regrets. But Kaler's gesture, that simple, devastating gesture, made me feel, for the first time, what it means to be truly human. Not human as in Homo sapiens, not human as in the species that conquered the world, but human as in mortal, vulnerable, responsible for the suffering we cause. Kaler, in his captivity, in his pain, in his impending death, had more humanity, more compassion, more grace than I have encountered in any government official, any intelligence briefing, any policy document. He saw me not as his captor, but as a fellow being, capable of understanding, capable of change. And I betrayed that faith. I walked out of that cell, filed my report, and let the machine grind him into dust. The years after Kaler's death were a slow descent into a kind of madness that I did not recognize until it was too late. I told myself I was fine, that I was moving on, that I was building a new life in Montana, away from the agency, away from the lies. But the truth was that I was haunted. I would wake in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, hearing that low, mournful vocalization, feeling the weight of Kaler's hand on my shoulder. I would spend hours staring at the forests outside my cabin, wondering if his family was still out there, wondering if they knew what had happened to him, wondering if they hated us, feared us, mourned him the way I mourned him. I began drinking heavily, trying to numb the guilt, the rage, the helplessness. I began avoiding people, isolating myself, because every conversation felt like a lie. How could I talk about the weather, about politics, about sports, when I carried the knowledge of a genocide that no one else acknowledged, that no one else even believed was happening? I tried, once, to tell someone. It was 1987, 6 years after Kaler's death. I was at a bar in Missoula, drunk and reckless, and I started talking to a man who claimed to be a wildlife biologist. I told him, in vague terms, that I had encountered evidence of an unknown hominid species in the Pacific Northwest, that the government was aware of their existence, that they were being systematically erased. He listened politely, nodded, and then laughed. He told me I had been watching too many tabloid shows, that Bigfoot was a hoax, a cultural myth, that there was no scientific evidence, no credible sightings, nothing. I insisted. I told him I had seen one, spoken to one, touched one. He stopped laughing. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and concern, and he told me, very gently, that I should consider seeing a therapist, that trauma and alcohol could create vivid delusions, that it was nothing to be ashamed of. I left that bar and never tried to tell anyone again, because I realized that the truth was not just classified, it was unbelievable. Even if I shouted it from rooftops, even if I showed photographs, recordings, evidence, people would dismiss it, rationalize it, explain it away. The world was not ready. The world did not want to know. So I buried it deeper. I threw myself into solitary work, took odd jobs as a consultant for private security firms, did background checks, risk assessments, anything to keep my mind occupied. But the guilt festered. I started researching, obsessively, everything I could find about Bigfoot sightings, about indigenous traditions, about government black sites and classified programs. I filed Freedom of Information Act requests, contacted retired agents, dug through declassified documents. I found nothing. No trace of Subject Alpha, no mention of the facility, no records of the operation. It had been erased, scrubbed clean, as if it never happened, as if Kaylor never existed. And that erasure, that systematic denial, broke something fundamental in me. Because it meant that Kaylor's suffering, his intelligence, his humanity, had been reduced to nothing. He was less than a footnote. He was a ghost. Then, in 2003, something changed. I was online, scrolling through a forum dedicated to cryptozoology, a place where enthusiasts shared stories, sightings, theories about Bigfoot and other unexplained creatures. I did not take most of it seriously. It was a mix of genuine curiosity and obvious hoaxes, but it was a way to feel connected, however distantly, to the truth I carried. And then I saw a post that made my heart stop. It was from someone using the handle Forest Watcher, and it described an encounter in the Olympic National Forest in 1998. The details were specific, precise, not the usual vague sighting report. The person described seeing a family group of 3 large bipedal creatures moving through the forest at dusk, carrying what looked like woven baskets filled with roots and berries. They described vocalizations, complex and structured, that sounded like language. They described one of the creatures stopping, turning, and looking directly at them, not with animal wariness, but with what they called unbearable sadness. The description matched Kaylor's people exactly, and at the end of the post, Forest Watcher wrote something that made my hands shake. I think they know we are killing them. I think they know they are dying, and they are letting us watch. I reached out to Forest Watcher through a private message, asking for more details, offering to share information. We corresponded for months. Forest Watcher turned out to be a wildlife ecologist named Dr. Evelyn Cross, who had been conducting field research on old-growth ecosystems in the Pacific Northwest for over 2 decades. She had encountered Kaylor's people. She called them the Hidden Ones multiple times. She had observed them from a distance, documented their behavior, collected hair samples, and scat for DNA analysis. And what she had found confirmed everything Kaylor had told me. The DNA analysis, conducted at a private lab to avoid official scrutiny, showed that the Hidden Ones were hominids, closely related to modern humans, but genetically distinct, a separate lineage that had diverged approximately 80,000 years ago. They were not Homo sapiens. They were Homo sylvanus, the forest people, and they were dying. Dr. Cross estimated, based on sighting patterns and population modeling, that there were fewer than 200 individuals left, down from the 300 Kaylor had indicated. The decline was accelerating. Within 50 years, maybe less, they would be extinct. I told Dr. Cross everything. I broke every vow of secrecy, every classification protocol, every legal barrier. I told her about Kaylor, about the black site, about the interrogation, about his death. I told her about the government programs, the captures, the experiments, the systematic erasure. I expected disbelief, skepticism, maybe even mockery. Instead, she was silent for a long time. Then she wrote back, "I believe you, and I think we can prove it." Dr. Cross has been collecting evidence for years, not just DNA samples, but photographs, audio recordings, behavioral observations, interviews with indigenous elders who had stories passed down through generations about the forest people. She had been building a case, quietly, carefully, to present to the scientific community. But she had been afraid of ridicule, afraid of career suicide, afraid of what the government might do if she went public. Now, with my testimony, with the inside knowledge of the black programs, she believed we could force the issue, demand recognition, demand protection for the Hidden Ones. We spent the next 5 years working together, compiling evidence, building a network of researchers, activists, and sympathetic officials. We documented sightings, collected genetic samples, recorded vocalizations, mapped territories. We interviewed dozens of people who had encountered the hidden ones, people who had kept silent out of fear or disbelief, but who, when offered a safe space to speak, shared stories that were heartbreaking and consistent. Stories of creatures that avoided humans, that fled at the first sign of contact, that lived in constant fear. Stories of families being separated, of young ones being found dead from starvation or exposure as their habitat shrank. Stories of a people in terminal decline. In 2008, we were ready. Dr. Cross published a paper in a peer-reviewed journal presenting the genetic evidence, the behavioral observations, the historical accounts. She called for immediate protection of the hidden ones under the Endangered Species Act, for the establishment of protected corridors and reserves, for an end to logging and development in their remaining territories. The response was swift and brutal. The paper was retracted within a week, the journal editor citing insufficient peer review and questionable methodology. Dr. Cross was dismissed from her university position, her research funding was revoked, and she was publicly discredited by former colleagues who called her work pseudoscience and career suicide. The genetic samples we had submitted for independent verification disappeared. The audio recordings were declared inconclusive. The photographic evidence was dismissed as misidentified wildlife or outright hoaxes. And the government, predictably, denied everything. No black sites, no captures, no subject alpha, no classified programs. Just the ravings of a disgraced scientist and a washed-up ex-CIA operative with a history of mental instability and substance abuse. We had failed again. The hidden ones remained unrecognized, unprotected, invisible. Dr. Cross fell into a deep depression after the retraction. She stopped responding to my emails. I heard through mutual contacts that she had moved to a remote cabin in Alaska, that she had given up on academia, on activism, on trying to save a species that the world refused to acknowledge. I understood. I felt the same despair, the same crushing weight of futility. We had tried to tell the truth, and the truth had been buried, just like Kyeller had been buried, just like his people were being buried under the relentless march of human progress. And I realized, finally, that this was not a fight we could win through official channels, through scientific journals, through legal petitions. The system was designed to protect itself, to preserve the illusion of human dominance, of human uniqueness. Admitting that the hidden ones existed, that they were intelligent, that they had rights, would require a fundamental reimagining of our relationship with the natural world, a humility and responsibility that our civilization was not willing to embrace. So I stopped fighting. I retreated back to my cabin, back to my isolation, back to the bottle. I told myself I had done everything I could, that I had honored Kaylor's memory by trying, even if I had failed. But the truth was that I was giving up. I was surrendering to the same forces that had killed Kaylor, that were killing his people. I was choosing silence, choosing complicity, choosing the comfort of denial over the agony of truth. And for another 16 years, that is how I lived, in silence, in shame, in slow, corrosive self-destruction, until the cancer came, until the doctors told me I was dying, until I realized that I had one last chance, one final opportunity to do what I should have done 43 years ago, to tell the truth, to say Kaylor's name, to make his suffering, his existence, his humanity matter. This recording, this confession, is my last act. I am recording it in my cabin in Montana, in the final weeks of my life. I know that when I release it, if I manage to release it before I die, there will be consequences. I know that the government will deny it, that scientists will dismiss it, that the public will debate its authenticity. I know that I will be called a liar, a fraud, a conspiracy theorist, a dying man desperate for attention. I do not care, because this is not about me. This is about Kaylor. This is about his family, his people, the hidden ones who are dying in silence while we destroy the last refuges of wilderness they have left. This is about bearing witness, about refusing to let them be erased, about saying, clearly and without equivocation, that they existed, that they exist, that they matter. Kaylor told me, in that cell, through gestures and drawings and the language we created together, that his people had a word for what I am doing now. The word, as best as I can approximate, translates to memory keeper. It is a role in their society, someone who carries the stories, who remembers the dead, who ensures that the past is not forgotten. Kaylor told me that when someone dies, their memory keeper speaks their name, tells their story, honors their life. He told me that this is sacred, that this is how his people defeat death, not by living forever, but by being remembered. And he asked me, in the final moments before I left that cell, to be his memory keeper, to remember him, to tell his story, to make sure that when he died, alone and afraid in a government facility, someone would know that he had lived, that he had loved, that he had mattered. I promised him I would. And then I failed him. For 43 years, I failed him. But I will not fail him anymore. Kaylor was born in the Olympic Mountains in the early 1940s, the exact year unknown because his people do not measure time the way we do. He was the youngest of 3 siblings, 2 brothers and himself. His mother was a skilled gatherer, his father a hunter and protector. He grew up learning the ways of the forest, the patterns of the seasons, the languages of animals, the stories of his ancestors. He was curious, playful, brave. He learned to climb trees before he could walk steadily on the ground. He learned to find water by listening to the land, to predict storms by watching the behavior of birds. He learned the songs his people sang to calm frightened children, to honor the dead, to celebrate the return of the salmon. He was, by all accounts, happy, until the first time he saw humans. He was 8 years old, approximately, when a group of loggers came into his family's territory. His father told the family to hide, to stay silent, to avoid contact at all costs. Kaylor watched from the cover of ferns as the loggers cut down ancient trees, as they dragged the trunks away with machines that roared and smoked. He watched as the forest he knew, the forest that had been his family's home for generations, was torn apart in a matter of days. He did not understand why. He did not understand what the humans wanted, why they would destroy something so beautiful, so alive. His father tried to explain, using the limited concepts of their language, that humans were different, that they did not see the forest as home, as family, as sacred. They saw it as resource, as commodity, as something to be used and discarded. Kaylor did not understand, but he learned to fear. The second time he encountered humans, he was 15. A group of hikers had wandered off trail deep into the wilderness. Kaylor's older brother, curious and reckless, approached them, wanting to see them up close. The hikers panicked. They screamed. One of them fired a rifle. Kaylor's brother was hit in the shoulder, a grazing wound, not fatal, but terrifying. The family fled, carrying the injured brother, and they did not return to that part of the forest for years. Kaylor learned that humans were not just destructive, they were dangerous. They killed without reason, without provocation, out of fear and ignorance. The third time he encountered humans, he was in his early 20s. He had taken a mate, a female from a neighboring family group, and they had just had their first child, a daughter. They were foraging near a river when they heard voices, human voices. Kaylor's mate grabbed their daughter and ran. Kaylor stayed behind, trying to draw the humans away, making himself visible so they would follow him instead of his family. It worked, but the humans were hunters, and they were faster, better equipped than he expected. They chased him for hours, through the forest, across ridges, into ravines. He was exhausted, terrified, desperate. He finally collapsed near a creek, unable to run any further. The hunters surrounded him. He thought he was going to die, but they did not kill him. They tranquilized him, loaded him into a truck, and took him away. That was the first time he was captured, the first time he was held in a facility, examined, tested, treated like an animal. He was kept for 3 weeks before being released, dumped back into the forest, traumatized and broken. He found his mate and daughter again, but something had changed. He had learned that humans did not just destroy the forest. They destroyed his people, directly, deliberately. The second capture happened when he was in his 30s. He had been more careful, more cautious, but his family had grown. 2 more children, both sons. Food was scarce that year, the salmon runs had failed, and they were forced to range farther from their usual territory, into areas closer to human settlements. He was hunting near a logging road when he was ambushed, tranquilized, taken again. This time he was held for 2 months. The tests were more invasive, more painful. They drew blood, took tissue samples, scanned his brain, tried to teach him tasks, puzzles, as if he were a laboratory rat. He refused to cooperate. He refused to eat. He grew weaker, sicker. Finally, they released him again, not out of compassion, but because he was no longer useful. He returned to his family, but he could see the fear in his mate's eyes, the way his children recoiled from his scent, the smell of human chemicals and antiseptics that clung to his fur. He had been contaminated, marked. He spent months trying to wash it away, rolling in mud and moss, bathing in rivers, but the memory remained. The violation remained. The third capture, the one that led to his death, happened in 1980. He was older now, in his early 40s, slowing down. His eldest daughter had taken a mate and left to start her own family. His sons were adolescents, strong and capable. He should have been entering the elder stage of his life, the time when he would teach, guide, pass down the stories and skills to the next generation. But the logging had intensified. The roads had pushed deeper. There were fewer places to hide, fewer places to be safe. His family was starving. One of his sons had died the previous winter, too weak to survive a harsh season. Kaylor had become desperate, reckless. He had started taking risks, foraging near human camps, scavenging food from dumpsters, and that was how they caught him. A coordinated operation, tranquilizer darts fired from multiple directions, teams of soldiers moving with precision. He did not even have time to run. He woke up in the facility, in the cell, and he knew, this time, that he would not leave. He knew that this time they would not release him. He knew that he was going to die there, and he did. Kaylor died on March 7, 1981, 6 weeks after his capture, 3 weeks after I left him. The official cause of death, according to the single-line communication I received, was complications from captivity. I do not know what that means specifically. I do not know if he starved to death, if he succumbed to an infection, if he simply gave up, stopped fighting, let go. I do not know if he was alone when he died, or if there were guards watching, scientists taking notes, officials deciding how to dispose of the body. I do not know if anyone spoke his name, if anyone acknowledged that a person had died, not a specimen, not a subject, but a person with a history, a family, a life that mattered. I do not know, and that not knowing is a wound that has never healed, because Kaylor deserved better. He deserved to die surrounded by his family, in the forest he loved, with dignity and peace. Instead, he died in a concrete cell, alone and afraid, betrayed by the one human he had chosen to trust. I have spent the last 43 years trying to understand why the government captured Kaylor, why they subjected him to such cruelty, why they erased all evidence of his existence. I have come to believe that it was not about science, not about understanding his species or protecting national security. It was about control. It was about maintaining the illusion that humans are unique, that we are the pinnacle of evolution, that we have the right to dominate and exploit every other form of life on this planet. Kaylor's existence challenged that illusion. He was intelligent, self-aware, capable of language and culture and emotion. He was, in every meaningful sense, human, and that terrified them. Because if Kaylor was human, if his people were human, then we had been committing genocide. We had been systematically erasing an entire branch of our own family. And that truth, that unbearable, devastating truth, could not be allowed to exist. So they buried it. They buried Kaylor. They buried the evidence. They buried the guilt. And they moved on, as if nothing had happened. But I cannot move on. I cannot forget, and I will not let Kaylor be forgotten. This recording is my attempt to honor his memory, to be the memory keeper he asked me to be. I am releasing it publicly, uploading it to multiple platforms, sending copies to journalists, scientists, activists, anyone who might listen. I am including every detail I can remember, every drawing Kaylor made, every gesture, every sound, every moment of those 72 hours we spent together. I am violating every classification protocol, every legal restriction, every threat of prosecution. I am doing this because Kaylor's story deserves to be told, and his people deserve to be recognized, protected, saved. I am doing this because I am dying and I have nothing left to lose. I am doing this because it is the right thing to do, even if it is 43 years too late. I do not know if this recording will change anything. I do not know if it will lead to protection for the hidden ones, if it will force the government to acknowledge their existence, if it will inspire a movement to save them. I do not know if anyone will even believe me, but I know that Kaylor's story is true. I know that he lived, that he suffered, that he died. I know that his people are still out there, still hiding, still dying. And I know that we have a choice. We can continue to ignore them, to destroy their habitats, to drive them into extinction, or we can choose differently. We can choose to recognize them as kin, as people, as beings with the same rights to life, dignity, and freedom that we claim for ourselves. We can choose to make space for them in this world, to protect the forests they need, to leave them in peace. We can choose to honor Kaylor's memory not with words, but with action, with change, with justice. I am 67 years old, and I am dying. The cancer has spread to my brain, and I am losing coherence, losing time, losing myself. I do not know how much longer I have. Days maybe, maybe hours. But I have finished this recording. I have told Kaylor's story. I have kept my promise. And now, in these final moments, I find myself thinking about that gesture he made, that simple, devastating gesture, when he placed his hand on my shoulder and signed hope. He was hoping that I would be different. He was hoping that I would do the right thing. He was hoping that his suffering would matter, that his story would be told, that his people would be remembered. I failed him for 43 years, but I will not fail him in death. Kaylor, if there is anything beyond this life, if there is a place where your people go when they die, I hope you know that I remembered. I hope you know that I told your story. I hope you know that you mattered, that you were loved, that you were mourned. I hope you forgive me for taking so long. I hope you understand that I tried, even if I failed, even if I was too weak, too afraid, too broken. I hope that somewhere in the forests you loved, your family is still alive, still free, still singing the songs you taught them. And I hope that maybe, just maybe, this recording will reach someone who can help them, who can protect them, who can ensure that your people do not vanish from this world without a trace. The last thing Kaylor said to me, the last gesture he made before the guards came to take me away was this. He placed both hands over his heart, then extended them toward me, palms up. It was a gesture of offering, of trust, of faith. He was giving me his heart, his story, his hope. And then he made one final sign, a sign we had created together in those 3 days, a sign that meant, remember me. I will, Kaylor. I will remember you. I will tell your story. I will make sure the world knows that you existed, that you mattered, that you were human in every way that counts. I will make sure that your people are not forgotten. And if I have failed, if this recording is ignored, if nothing changes, at least I will die knowing that I tried, that I kept my promise, that I was, in the end, your memory keeper. Goodbye, my friend. Goodbye, brother. I am sorry I could not save you. I am sorry I could not save your people. But I will carry you with me wherever I go next, and I will hope, as you hoped, that maybe, just maybe, the truth will matter. That maybe, just maybe, we can still choose differently. That maybe, just maybe, it is not too late. This is Daniel Mercer, former CIA operative, memory keeper, dying man, signing off. Kaylor lived. Kaylor mattered. Kaylor was human. Remember him. Please remember him.